You're watching a swarm of bees move in perfect coordination. Thousands of individuals, all flying, building, feeding, defending, and somehow nothing collapses into chaos. There's no traffic jam, no confusion, no visible leader giving orders. And yet, at the center of it all, there's a single bee that everyone talks about, the queen. But here's the question that most people never stop to ask. If bees are so organized, so efficient, and so naturally cooperative, why do they need a queen at all? And more importantly, is she really in charge? Before we get into it, take a second to subscribe and drop a like. It helps more than you think, and it keeps videos like this coming. Now, here's the surprising truth. Most people grow up thinking the queen bee is some kind of ruler, the boss, the one giving commands, deciding what every bee should do. But that idea is completely wrong. The queen doesn't control the hive the way a human leader would. She doesn't give instructions. She doesn't organize work. She doesn't tell worker bees where to go or what to build. In fact, if you removed the queen and replaced her with another one, the day-to-day behavior of the hive wouldn't suddenly change in some dramatic, obvious way. So if she's not leading, what is she actually doing? To understand that, you have to look at the hive not as a group of individuals, but as a single living system. A beehive works more like a body than a society. Each bee is like a cell, individually simple, but collectively forming something far more complex. And just like a body needs coordination at a biological level, the hive needs something that keeps everything aligned. This is where the queen comes in. Her real role isn't to command, it's to regulate. Here's what surprises most people. The queen's primary job is to lay eggs. That's it. She can lay up to thousands per day, constantly replenishing the population. But laying eggs is only half the story. The other half is something you can't even see: chemistry. The queen produces specific chemical signals, pheromones, that spread throughout the hive. These signals act like a kind of invisible communication network, constantly informing every bee that the system is stable, functioning, and complete. This is where most people get confused. They assume organization comes from authority, but in a hive, organization comes from signals. When the queen is healthy and producing strong pheromones, worker bees behave differently. They stay focused on their roles. They don't attempt to reproduce. They maintain the structure of the colony. It's not because they're being told what to do. It's because the environment, shaped by the queen, influences how they behave. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. The queen isn't special because she was born different. She became different. Every queen starts as a regular larva. Genetically, she's almost identical to any worker bee. The difference comes from what she's fed. A future queen is given a substance called royal jelly, a nutrient-rich secretion that completely alters her development. It changes her size, her lifespan, and most importantly, her reproductive capability. So the hive doesn't just follow a queen, it creates one. And that flips the entire idea upside down. Instead of a leader shaping the group shapes the leader. When a hive needs a new queen, maybe the old one is aging or has died, worker bees select specific larvae and begin feeding them royal jelly. Multiple potential queens may develop at the same time, but only one will remain. And the process of choosing isn't democratic, strategic, or planned in the way humans think. It's emergent. It comes from interactions, competition, timing, and environmental conditions. No single bee decides. The system decides. And that's the key to understanding why the queen exists. She's not there to rule. She's there because the system needs a central biological source of reproduction and regulation. Without her, something subtle but critical begins to break down. Worker bees might start laying unfertilized eggs. Behavior becomes less coordinated. The chemical balance shifts. Not instantly, not dramatically, but enough that over time, the entire hive becomes unstable. So the queen isn't a boss. She's more like a living signal, a biological anchor that keeps everything aligned without ever giving a single command. And once you see it that way, the idea of leadership inside a beehive starts to look completely different from anything we're used to. Because the real power in a hive doesn't come from one bee at the top. It comes from the system itself. And in the next part, things get even more surprising because there are moments when the hive will deliberately replace its own queen, even when she's still alive. And the reason behind that reveals something even deeper about how this entire system really works. Because sometimes the simplest things hide the most misunderstood truths.
The hive is thriving. Everything seems stable. The queen is alive, laying eggs, producing pheromones, doing exactly what she's supposed to do. And then something unexpected happens. The bees decide to replace her. Not because she's dead, not because the hive is collapsing, but because somehow, collectively, they sense that she's no longer good enough. So the question becomes impossible to ignore. How can thousands of tiny insects with no central leader, no meetings, no discussions decide that it's time to remove their own queen? Before we go deeper, take a second to subscribe and leave a like. It helps more than you think, and it keeps this kind of content coming. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Most people assume that if the queen is still alive, she stays in power until she dies. But that's not how a hive works. Because the queen isn't protected by authority. She's protected by performance. This is where most people get confused. They think the queen is the most important individual in the hive, but in reality, the hive is more important than the queen. Always. If the queen starts producing fewer eggs or if her pheromones weaken even slightly, the worker bees begin to react. Not consciously, not strategically, but biologically. Something feels off in the system, and that feeling spreads. Pheromones no longer circulate with the same strength. The chemical harmony of the hive starts to shift. Worker bees begin behaving differently, more restless, less synchronized. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it's enough. Here's what surprises most people. The hive doesn't wait for failure. It anticipates it. Worker bees will begin selecting new larvae, just like before, and start feeding them royal jelly. Quietly in the background, a replacement is being prepared. At the same time, the current queen is still walking around, still laying eggs, completely unaware that her time is coming to an end. There's no announcement, no signal that says you're done, just a silent transition already in motion. And when the new queen emerges, everything changes. In some cases, the new queen will directly eliminate the old one. In others, the hive may swarm, splitting into two groups, with one queen leaving and the other staying behind. But either way, the message is clear. The queen exists for the hive, not the other way around. And this reveals something deeper about how the entire system works. Because at no point does any single bee understand the full picture. No bee knows the plan. Each one is simply reacting to local signals, pheromones, interactions, tiny changes in the environment. And yet, from those simple reactions, a highly intelligent, adaptive system emerges. This is where the idea of control completely falls apart. There is no central authority, no mastermind, no leader making decisions for everyone else. Instead, control is distributed. Shared across thousands of individuals, each following simple rules, each responding to immediate feedback. And somehow, it works better than most centralized systems we're familiar with. The queen, in this context, is not a ruler. She's a function, a role that can be created, replaced, or removed whenever the system requires it. And once you see that, the question changes. It's no longer, why does the hive have a queen? It becomes, how does something so complex work without anyone actually being in charge? Because the real intelligence of the hive isn't inside the queen. It's in the connections between every single bee, in the constant flow of signals, in the balance between stability and change. And that idea goes far beyond bees. It appears in nature, in ecosystems, even in human-made systems like the internet, where no single entity controls everything, but everything still functions together. So, the next time you think about a queen bee, it's worth remembering this. She doesn't lead the hive, she doesn't control it, and she isn't the reason the system works. She's just one part of a much bigger mechanism, a living system that can adapt, replace, and reorganize itself without ever needing a leader. And maybe that's the most surprising part of all, because sometimes the things that look like they're in charge are actually just playing a role in something far more complex. So, if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really makes a difference, because sometimes the simplest things hide the most misunderstood truths.